Hello and welcome to the third edition of DH Bengaluru 2040 Summit. I'm Rishika Kashyap and I have with me Aromar Revi, who's the director of Indian Institute for Human Settlements. Sir, thank you so much for joining us today. I have a few quick questions for you. The panel was very insightful on climate resilience. So as we know, a lot of parts in Bengaluru are facing water starvation. So what do you think is the issue and what needs to be done so it doesn't get worse?
We have to have a more equitable system of distributing water across the city. The peripheries of the city have tremendous growth, but they only have groundwater. And we're moving water to them with tankers. We have to make sure that we have water systems across the city. We don't waste water at the center of the city where it flows out of BWSSP pipelines. And we have to make sure that we recycle water at a very large scale. At the moment it's happening, moderately well, but in a small scale. Just like a city like Beijing, recycle 60% of its water, we have to do that. People have to use less water, but have the same services, which means that we have to have dual piping, we have to use grey water, we have to make sure that when we have water that comes out, it's treated and brought back to maintain the green cover in our cities, our lakes and our gardens and parks.
So yes, I agree with you. There's a lot that needs to be done. So when it comes to climate resilience, how do you think Bengaluru's approach has been and what does it need to do going forward?
Bangalore is a privileged city. It's got wonderful weather. The climate is going to change, but it has to basically look after its water and make sure that it makes a shift into using renewable energy for most of its energy needs. Plus, because we're building so quickly, all the buildings that we build have to use maybe a third or the fourth of the kind of energy we're currently using. We should not be using air conditioning as much as people would like to, because the city is air conditioned. So if you're able to deal with the urban heat island by having more green and blue and lakes, that can keep the city temperatures down. And you have to make sure that you don't use air conditioning and have buildings that are comfortable on their own. Because if you don't use air conditioning, you can use solar PV electricity from the roof and of course from other locations to be able to drive your city. And the same thing for transportation. We have to move away from using a lot of diesel and CNG and petrol-driven vehicles into electric vehicles, which is now a big industry in this region, move to public transport and make sure that our bus system is entirely electric and accessible across that. When you bring all of these elements together, which may take a few years, then you have a city that is accessible, that's livable, that's safe, especially at night for women and for children. Then the city will actually get where it should be getting to over the next 15 or 20 years. Because remember, this is going to be the third largest city in the country. It's almost there at the moment. It should also be the most livable city, the most accessible, the most inclusive city, because it has that active culture that we want to hold on to and make sure that the physical infrastructure, the services, and the housing actually enable that to happen.
So this is good insight on what needs to be done. But currently, where do you think Bengaluru stands in terms of climate resilience compared to other cities in our country?
It's a lot better in some cases, excepting for the question of water. We're making good progress on the energy side, but the real challenge for us is governance here. Because if we get the governance right, not only of the city, but the metropolitan region, then we will be able to build resilience and make sure that we don't emit too much. Because it's fairly simple. You need to have security of water, you need to have good food and secure food. You've got to make sure that the quality of the water is not messed up and you destroy your lakes and gardens. But most important, citizens have to have access to services which are equitable across the city. And for that you need good governance, because the city has a lot of resources. It has to be channelized, whether it comes from the private sector or from the government, into the right modes of doing things. So I think Bangalore's got a lot of things, or Bangalore's got a lot of things going for it, but we have to hold things together. And I think the real challenge is in the governance frame, because if we don't sort out that problem, the fragmentation will lead to a lot of unintended consequences, which you can see. Today, this city has an air quality index of about 70. Delhi is sitting at nearly at 450. Mumbai is at 200. Why is that? Natural endowment, the way that we've been able to do certain things, the fact that we don't have too many dirty industries just now, and we're trying to move very quickly into technological regimes that give us the opportunity to do that kind of stuff. So we've got to keep that momentum, but what holds it together is governance. Citizens, the government, the private sector, civil society, working together to try and make sure that this vision that we have of a more livable, inclusive, convivial city can actually be a reality, not something that's in paper or people like you and I will write about in an editorial. It has to be real. Then we won't have to write editorials anymore.
So I have one final question for you. Where do you see Bengaluru by 2040?
I think it could be a remarkable world city. And it could be a really interesting example, not only for the country, but for other parts of the world. There's so many young people here who are trying to make a difference to their lives and whatever it is. Same thing in terms of the institutions that are in the city. We can actually set a very, very different pathway. But it's not going to be easy. It's going to be able to, it's about building new kinds of alliances, new kinds of partnerships. And like I said again, the governance frame, I think, is one of our fundamental challenges. And the city and its countryside have to be brought together at the same time. It's not only about the metropolitan area, it's also the people who give us food, the water, the energy that comes from the outside, and making sure there's equity and justice as far as that's concerned. Otherwise, the kind of thing that we are seeing happening in Delhi is going to happen to the city. Because, we're taking water from Mandya. The farmers there are in their right to be able to say that this is a problem as far as they're concerned. So there has to be a balancing of interest across space and time to make that possible.
So thank you so much for having this chat. It was as insightful as your panel was. Thank you so much for talking.